So I've been curious about something for a very long time. In canister welds, I've got a very small, just 1-inch canisters here that I've started to set up. Um, I've got this steel grit that's used for sandblasting, and I've always wondered what it would do in a canister weld. I've heard people talk about using it, but I've never seen it. Um, it's definitely coarser than what you would normally get from like a knife making supply company, the very fine powder from Jantz is much different and much finer. Now that the compressor has stopped running. But anyway, this stuff it comes in 25-pound buckets or so. It's, like I said, a lot coarser. I'm suspecting it's probably a medium carbon steel, but I'm not sure about that. So I just want to experiment. Just put a little canister together that's just powder and see what it does, because I don't want to have anything else in there that I know is high carbon steel, because that can mess up any tests that I do on it. And while I've got the forge lit next time, I'm going to go ahead and run it through and see what we get. Now, this can is a little small to be easy to fill, so we're going to grab a scrap of angle iron here. Alright, just put our cap on there. Packs everything in nice and tight. And we're going to clean that up a little bit with the grinder and then weld it all up and put a stick on it so we can grab onto it. Well, actually, this is small enough I could probably just throw it straight in the forge and still be able to grab onto it. So we'll just go ahead and throw it in the forge like that. And see how it works. Now, I'm not sure why anybody would want to do this, because you can get, of course, good high quality powdered steel from knife making supply companies. Except you can just pick this up at any hardware store, or most hardware stores, big stores at least, will have blasting media, and a lot of them have the steel blasting media. I mean, Harbor Freight carries it even. So it's something that's locally available, I guess. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and see what happens. So I'm just going to rush on through this piece. I'm not really expecting to get a usable piece of steel out of this canister. Just expecting to find a piece that I can see what its properties are and see if it does harden up. I suspect it will, but I don't know to what extent at this point. But I'll put it in the forge and let it heat up, and then take it to the press and squish it. I didn't bother trying to make squaring dies for this size. Maybe in the future I will, but you can even take it to the anvil and hit it with a hammer, and you can feel it come together on the anvil. If you listen really close to the hammer strikes, you can hear a different noise as it starts being solid. The hammer starts to bounce off. Then I'm going to just flatten it out, and I'll take a couple passes on the press to do that. Cut off the ends and grind away at it until I grind down to the metal that's in the center. I didn't bother trying to remove the canister at all. I just ground through it. And the canister was actually so rusty, it was scaled with rust, and it's still welded to the material inside. So there goes the theory that rust keeps welding from sticking. It makes it harder to stick, but it will still stick. I kind of ground on this until I started to see, I could see a line where the mild steel of the canister ended and where the material inside of it began. And I could also start seeing different sparks. Again, you'll see some sparks that burst. That's a sign you've got some more carbon content in there. But again, it didn't look like a really high carbon steel. threw sparks like 1045 or 1050 would throw sparks. And I just quenched it in oil. There's a possibility I could have quenched it in water and gotten it a little harder than it was if it was 1045 or something like that. I cleaned off the gunk from quenching. Okay, so where are we at on this particular little project? I really only did this because I was curious. I wanted to see what that material was that's in that steel grit. And I've got a pretty good idea now that it's probably something like a medium carbon steel, maybe low to medium. It does harden. It hardened in oil enough that you can tell it's harder than the mild steel, but it did not harden like glass hard and where it really skated a file grate. If I hardened it in water, it might get even harder still than this. Like you would with a railroad spike knife or something like that, it might actually harden up enough to be pretty useful, but right now it's a little soft even for a knife. It might work good for an axe or something like that, but I don't know why you need canister to make an axe, unless you're doing something really strange with it. It's a possibility, I guess. I guess there's also a possibility you could add carbon by throwing in graphite or something, and graphite powder and mixing it in with it, and maybe getting a higher carbon out of it that way, or mixing in a higher carbon steel as well and get a swirling, strange pattern. The stuff is cheaper than going with the fine mesh powder that you can buy from Jantz or somebody like that, which is generally about $3.50 to $4 a pound, whereas this is about $2 to $2.25 a pound. It comes in 25-pound buckets, but is it worth it? Probably not. It's an interesting experiment. It's interesting to see how it turns out and what you can do with it. You can see here in this piece that I did take and etch it, so you can see the line in it of where the mild steel is still on there. Mild steel is gray, and the darker streak is the core part that's made from the powdered or the just broken grit steel. So all in all, satisfied my curiosity. But I'm not sure it's a technique that I'll need to use anywhere because I'll just probably go ahead and buy the fine mesh powder that I've already got some of in the shop if I'm going to do any more canister Damascus, because it's a known quantity. It's a known steel and a known amount, and I know it hardens well. Whereas this, who knows? I may play with it again just to see what I can do with it. I may try and make a big huge chunk that I can make an axe or something out of. I'm not sure what I would put in it. To be the other parts in the canister Damascus. It's kind of plain, just using metal powder all by itself. You gotta throw something else in the canister. So, something I'll have to think about.